Hello, and in this HTML and CSS tutorial we're going to learn about divisions, IDs and classes. This is the tutorial that you've all been waiting for. I've over-bragged this tutorial so much, it better be awesome. So to start off with, I've just got an empty HTML document. Well, I say empty. We just have our basic structure, we have our HTML, we have our head, we have our body, and we've linked our CSS, and we have a simple title. And then inside of our CSS document, we just simply have some body stylings, much like the CSS we were using last lesson. So let's get started. So divisions to start off with. Now, basically, what divisions are is they're quite literally a division of a page or a section of a page, and we do this using the div tag. So we can just use div /div, and this thing here is a div element. So if we just put some text inside here, like hello, and we refresh our page in Safari, we can see it looks no different to any other text at the moment, because all we've done is it's just regular text, it's just in a different section of the page. So let's just target this div using div, and let's give it a background color of FCO, and let's refresh, and we can see that it's actually taking up 100% of the width by default. And this is just one of the many signs that it is indeed a block element. So if we type something after it, like hi, and something before it, like hi, but both outside of the div, we should see the div takes up its own individual line. Yep, it does, because a div is a block element. So let's get that out of the way. So divs, really, you kind of think, well, by default, what can you really do with the div? Well, for now, let's just use the div selector. So we're just selecting any div on the page, which isn't really very good practice, because if we create, obviously, another div, what did I just do? Oh, I see. So if we create another div, that's also going to have the same stuff in. So if we just have another div that says hi, that's also going to have a background of FCO, and it's going to have exactly the same styling. So up until this point in all of our HTML and CSS tutorials, we've only actually used selectors, which are to do with general elements. Now, this is where things are going to change. So to start off with, though, let's quickly do some styling on the div we have on the page. So divs are really, really awesome because you can apply some really cool styling to them, because they're basically just a general block element, which makes up a section of the page. So to start off with, let's keep the background as that color. Let's just give it a margin of, in fact, don't worry about margins yet. Let's give it a width first of all. That's way more important, of like 50%, and we'll give it a height of 40%. And we can just refresh the page, and we can see, ta-da, it's now taking up 50% of the page's width and 40% of the page's height. And by the way, percentage is a relative measurement, so if we just open this up and just remove it, you can see it changes size, just like that. And the same would happen if we change the height of the page, because it's all relative, which can be really cool if you're viewing on a smaller screen, so everything just scales down for you. But anyway, that's not what this tutorial is supposed to be about. So let's give it a margin of 0 auto. Now, I'm not sure if I've talked to you about 0 auto before, but I'll just quickly walk you through it. And you can see it's actually centered now horizontally. Now, whenever you set a margin left and right to auto, don't really worry about the 0. That's just saying the margin up and down to 0. Because remember, if we give margin 2 values, it's going to do the first one for the up and down margins, and the second one for the left and right margins. So essentially, all we're doing is we're saying set the left margin and the right margin to be automatic. And so what it does when it does that, it just makes them equal and basically makes this centered horizontally. So let's actually put this up to 100 pixels auto, so it's going to have 100 pixels margin on the top and bottom. And we can see, there you go, now it's slightly off the top of the page, which is kind of what I wanted. So you can see already, we actually have something that looks a bit more like a web page on the modern web today, because we actually have different sections of the documents which have different backgrounds and stuff. So if we give this some padding as well, of like 20 pixels, you can see, bam, we might want a simple border of 1 pixel, 2 pixels solid, black, let's just say. It's probably isn't going to look too nice, who really cares. It's just, there you go. So we can see this is looking a lot more like pages on the modern web today. Before, we just kind of had text and different elements jumbled together. Divs give real structure to our page, they allow different sections of our page, and now we're going to change things up even more by using IDs and classes. Let's just quickly give this color of FFF as well. So that's just some simple div styling. That's not difficult. We can put whatever we like inside here because it's a block element. Might just want a header 1 in here that says heading and hello. My name is Epsilon and I run this website. Save that, refresh that, and maybe that's your web page. Maybe you want your web page to be as simple as a centered content division with 100 pixels top and bottom margins, and it has some content in it. I mean, that'd be perfectly fine. I mean, sure, maybe it's a little bit too simplistic and the colors aren't great. That'd be a perfectly fine page for the modern web today. What's happened to our doc type? HTML5 basic, did I call it? Yeah. Oh, I see. Whoops, we haven't done doc types yet, have we? Let's just go back to what we had. Never mind. Never mind. Forget I mentioned the word doc type. I was just wondering, what the hell's our doc type? We'll have to learn about doc types another day. Now, we have this. Let's go ahead and assign this div an ID. Now, we do this simply using the ID attribute. So, let's just set this to an ID of main content. Just like that. Now, let me just explain to you what an ID is. So, an ID is basically something we can use to uniquely identify one element on a page. Now, when you use IDs, only one element on your whole page can have that ID. That's the rules of IDs. And you can only have one ID on an element. So if we were going to create another div, that would have to have a different ID. So we could say secondary content, like that. And we could end the div. And we could type something else in here. Whoops. Like that. And that would be a different division of the page. However, we cannot do that. It would probably work. Yeah, it would work technically because CSS doesn't actually care if you abide by the rules or not. But no. You really should not do that because, well, just don't do it, basically. I'm going to tell you what to do. I'll probably explain it in another tutorial. Let me just quickly put my phone on silent so that doesn't disturb us anymore. Okay, so we have IDs. Now think of IDs kind of like serial numbers on products. There's only one product or one division or one element that has that ID, and it can't have more than one. So we can't just do a space and then write, yeah, this is also secondary content. No. You can only have one ID. So now what we can do is to actually target this ID in our CSS, we can go ahead and, oh yeah, we didn't have this before, so it might not have worked. Let's quickly try that. But yeah, to target IDs in the CSS, all we have to do is do a hash to tell CSS we're targeting an ID, and then we type the name of that ID, so main content, for example. And we'll see this now displays just as it did before. But it also means if we create another div, it's just a regular div without an ID, or perhaps with a different ID, and write hi, you can see, aha, this doesn't have the styling that our previous div had. And let's just quickly check main content. It's probably going to display the same, isn't it? Yeah. But again, don't do this. This is bad. It's bad stuff. This is just because CSS doesn't mind. So div ID is main content, and so we can apply custom styling to this. We could also create another div with an ID of secondary content, as we did a little bit earlier. Content and not /dov /div. Let's just give it some lorem text, and let's just target that in CSS using hash secondary content, and then we just apply some styling to it. So we might want this one, we want width 100%, height 20%, or you might want to give pixel values. It doesn't really matter. Margin 0 auto, or margin perhaps 10 auto. We'll give it padding of 10 pixels, and I know something we could do. Let's give it, let's do that, and then we refresh, and we can see we now have this. Let's just give it a background so we can see what's happening with it. And let's give it text color using a color property of white. So there you go. We can see we now have this other division. If we set this perhaps to 20, we might want to apply a property to it such as float left. Whoops. So just float left, so we could have, darn, that's like too big. Or is it because we have the margin auto? Just take this away. Oh, we could just go ahead and say float right. It's not quite what I wanted, but let's just set this to 100. Okay, so the margin auto is pretty much going to be disregarded in this sense because we have the float on both of them. But again, this is a thing where float actually becomes really, really useful because you can float different elements around the page. Now, I should probably stop here before I get carried away and mention that we can have other elements that have IDs as well. So we could just go like dev.hq.net/images/logo.png, and we have the slash here. I should probably talk about the slash another time because we technically don't necessarily need it, but we kind of do sometimes. I'll speak about that at a different time. So we didn't give it an ID, did we? ID equals logo, perhaps. And so we could just have some styling. Let's just put it up here. Logo, and we could say we want the width of that to be 100%. We want the height to be 200 pixels. We want it to have a border of 10 pixels solid, 666, and we want, I can't think of anything else you'd want to style an image with. So let's just refresh, and you can see, wow, now here's our logo image, which we made look like that using an ID. If we then have another image on the page, it's not going to have that styling, because it's not going to have that ID. So we just have perhaps bullets.png. You can see this doesn't have the same styling as this, even though they're both images, because we've used IDs. So as well as IDs, we also have classes. Let me just bring back my divisions, because I prefer playing with divisions, since this tutorial is about divisions, after all. Okay, so classes are very much like divisions, apart from you can apply more than one element on the page to the same class, and things can have multiple classes. It's also worth noting that things can have classes and IDs. So with this div up here, I could also give it a class by simply using the class attribute of, I don't know, obviously you can call it whatever you like and then reference that in the CSS. So let's just say green text. Let's just say we wanted a class, things that had green text. So class, let's also give this one a class of green text because we're allowed to do that with classes. Let's just quickly get these, let's remove that. Let's remove the colors on these division IDs. Well, let's just, before we apply the CSS to that, let's just see what it looks like. Yeah, we put the floats on, didn't we? Let's take the floats off. Oops. Okay, is that a bit better? Why is it so thin? Let's put the width up to 50%. In fact, I probably shouldn't use margin 0 auto simply because it's going to really annoy me when I'm editing. Okay, so let's just have it like that. Perhaps some margin on the top of this guy. Some margin, 100 pixels, 0 pixels, or 50. Okay, cool. So we have our first division, which we call main content, I think, and then we have our second division, which the text is the same color. That's not really a problem though. We can change that in a second. And that's our secondary content division. I keep accidentally dragging the side of the page. And we also have given the class of both of these of green text. Now, to target classes in CSS, we just use a dot or a full stop or a period, whatever you want to call it, to target classes. And then we use the name of the class, so green text. And then we say color green, so you might want 0F0 for your green. And we refresh the page, and you can see, aha, now these all share the same color green text because they're all in the class of green text, and we've specified the styling of anything in the class of green text to have the color 0F0. And as I said, you can apply multiple classes, and you do this just by putting a space. So you might want green text, and what else would you want? Border effect. And you might want this on both of them, although I guess then you could probably just make one unified class for them if you want to do something like that. So let's just have border effect on main content. Border effect, and that's going to be a border of 10 pixels, solid, light blue, just like that. And we already have a border, so let's just take him off the ID. That is not to screw anything up, and we refresh it. We can see, aha, now it has this light blue border, because as well as being in the green text class, it's also in the border effect class. And if we wanted to, we could also give our secondary content division, because it has an ID of secondary content, we could also give it a class of border effect as well if we wanted to have the same effect, like that. It's probably hurting your eyes, all this colouring. Let's just change green text to a slightly nicer green. What's the regular green like? Just a little bit better, I suppose. Do we have a light green? Nah, that looks slightly better, I guess. Will suffice for that for the time being. So divisions are so useful. In fact, let's go ahead and make a very simple website using them. Let's just remove the classes. We don't really need those for the time being. So the first thing we're going to do, let's remove all these guys too. First thing we're going to want to do in our website is to make a header. So let's have a div with an ID of header. Notice, by the way, whenever you give something an ID or a class, obviously you can name it what you want, but it's generally considered good practice to give it a name which is semantic. And what I mean by that is that it has meaning, and I don't mean meaning relating to the color or the positioning, because generally it's considered very bad practice to give a division something like right content or something like that, and much better to give it something like side content, because then if you want to change the styling in the future to maybe, I don't know, float right instead of float left, you're then going to have to change all your divisions names from, let's just say, left content to right content. So it's often considered more semantic, give it more meaning, but don't make it relate to specific stylings which you could easily change. So anyway, div ID equals header, and we might want some simple text in here, or even better, let's create an unordered list, and let's just give this some list elements, and these are going to be our navigation. So I'm going to have home, about, portfolio, and contact, just like that. And let's go ahead and give the UL an ID, because we're probably going to only have one navigation UL, and we're probably going to want to put some specific stylings on it. So we have header with an ID of header, and we also have an ID of nav. So let's just go ahead and let's go header. Remember, we use the hash to target our ID, and we're just going to give it a width of 100% and a height of 100 pixels and a background of, let's give it 333, and a border bottom of 1 pixel, solid black, and let's see what that looks like at the moment. Okay, so it's looking like that. You can see our unordered list has inherited its default styling, but that's not really a problem. So let's just change that. So hash nav is to target our unordered list. And a note, by the way, that you can just do nested CSS stuff with this as well. So you can say the LIs inside nav if we wanted to do that. We don't in this case. But let's just set the list style type to none. See how everything's coming together now. And let's get these guys to float left, or yeah, let's float left for now. And let's just go and get the nav LIs, and let's get them all to have a margin right of 20 pixels. And let's just see how that looks. Perhaps, oh yes, I wanted the LIs to float left, not the UL. Whoops. Okay, so we now actually have these bits, which look slightly like a modern day website navigation. We actually are going to want these to be links, so let's just surround these in the A tag, and I'm just going to give them a link of hash just for the time being, so they don't actually lead to anywhere. Talking of linking to hash, I'll show you a little trick in a minute as well, which is really cool. So let's just, here we go. So all we have here is an unordered list with an ID of nav, which is inside a div with an ID of header. And inside the unordered list, we have various list points, because that's basically what navigation is. It's just an unordered list, each of which contain a link to a different place on the website. So let's say perhaps nav LIA, so we can style the links themselves. Perhaps we want them to have the color of white, and we want the font weight. I'm not sure if we've gone over this before, but you can pretty much set that to bold. That's the only value I really use of it. I'm imagining there are some others. And we might want nav LIA hover to do the hover effect. And then we might want the color to go to something like DDD. See how everything's coming together now. Let's refresh the page. Ta-da! Maybe we want this to have text decoration of none, so we don't have those underlines. And let's do a secret little trick here. It's not secret at all. And let's just, in our header, let's set our line height, which we've gone over before, how high basically a line should be, to 100 pixels. Now this little trick, because it's the same as the height of the header, is going to mean that everything's vertically centered inside the header, as long as we only have one line inside the header. So if we refresh, this is now in the center. Notice how this is now looking like a proper website. This is all people do when they're creating websites. So let's just set this border bottom to possibly something we can see a bit better, maybe an FCO. Let's give it 2 pixels. And then if we wanted, we could go on to create a main content division, just as our main content was earlier. I'm getting a little bit carried away, but let's just do that anyway. Let me just do this so you guys can see it in the recording. Main content, and perhaps we want that to have a width of 60% and a height 40% or 50%. I want to have a background of FCO. I want to have a border of 1 pixel solid black. And we want to have a margin of 100 pixels auto. And let's actually then put that in our markup as well, obviously, or it's not going to exist. So we just want another division. And again, we're going to use an ID because we only want one main content on the page. And let's just give it a heading. So H1 heading. And then we can go, let's just give it some lorem text. I can't bother to make up some stuff. Sorry if I'm walking through things a bit fast. I'm getting a bit enthusiastic about everything. Let's give it some padding as well. Padding 20 pixels. Let's give it color. In fact, we should probably do that from on our body level. Let's just give everything a default color of FFF. And let's go back to our main content and give it something a bit more sensible, like maybe 666 background. And ta-da! We have what is basically a basic website. If we wanted, we could create another footer division, which would be the footer, and then we would pretty much have a website, all through the simple techniques we've learned. So I'm really sorry if I've gone over things very fast today. I'm not sure if you noticed I got a little bit enthusiastic on everything, but pretty much divisions are a section of a page. IDs and classes are so useful. In fact, perhaps we would have something like a class on these guys. You probably wouldn't, because you can just target them through using nav_lia, but maybe you'd want each of these to have a class of navlink. Something like that isn't really necessary. And I'm going to show you one last trick before I end this video, because I'm not sure how long this has gone on for. But what we're going to do is we're just going to put some lorem text out in the open like that. Let's just have that up. And that's just so we can scroll the page down. And we're going to have another division. It's going to have an ID of content near the bottom. And this is all just to show you one last trick. Let me just put some space at the bottom to shift this up the screen so it'll be easy for you guys to see. Slash the division, and let's just give it some lorem text, just a paragraph. And let's just give some styling to content near the bottom. So hash to target the ID, and let's just give it a width of 600 pixels, a height of 500 pixels, background of FCO, no, I'm too obsessed with the FCO, 222, what does that look like? So we scroll down, here it is. Let's just quickly give it a margin 0 of auto, margin 0 auto, and let's give it a border of, no, we don't need a border, what am I talking about? Let's just give it some padding. I'm getting carried away. So, okay, so we have this division down here, and we've called it content near the bottom, as shown in our CSS and more importantly in our markup. Now, what you can do is a really cool trick. If we were to have a link up here, let's just say in our main content division, ahref, we'll sign that in a minute. It says click me as its link text or its anchor text. Whoops, /a is what I meant. And if we set the href to hash and then the name of our division, notice we're using the hash for the ID again, and this only works with IDs, not for classes, but if you basically href to the name of a division, which has a hash before it, then if we click it, it actually is going to bring you to that division on the page. And it's only made it halfway down because we haven't got any more of our page. Usually it's going to have it right at the top of the page, so the division would usually be like up here. And pretty much you can either do that through using a link like we've just done like that, or you could just literally type it in your URL bar if you quickly want to get somewhere. You can just use hash content at the bottom and it's going to get you to that whatever has that ID, whether it's an image, whether it's division, whether it's an old list. It's going to work because it has an ID, and that's another one of the reasons why having a unique ID is important, because how's your web browser going to know which ID to go to if there are two things that have the same ID? Again, another one of the reasons that that is happening. So If you don't understand anything in this tutorial, it isn't really all that complicated. All we're doing is we're just basically using all the basics that we've learned, which kind of seemed boring before. We just have some text on a page, and we're actually doing some, well, it's not really advanced stuff, but we're creating what looks like some really advanced stuff just by using these simple techniques. We just have divisions with IDs or classes, and then we apply styling to that using our CSS. So that is the end of this tutorial. I hope it's been a good tutorial, and I hope you've learned a lot from it. I would suggest you now go out, try and create your own very simple website, or more advanced website if you're feeling up to it, using these techniques, and see what you can do. So that's the end of this tutorial. Have a nice day.